Washington mornings on the Mall. 105.9 FM. And AM 630. WMAL.
7:07 on WMAL, where Washington comes to talk. It's Brian Wilson. Larry O'Connor be back next week, still taking some time to be with family. Tori Clark will be along here in just a moment to join us. I want to talk to you a little bit about this continuing story. As you know, we've been raising questions about voter integrity for some time, and after the election, we took it upon ourselves to sort of air some of the things that were coming across our transom from people who said they saw things that bothered them. Now we are the subject of an attack from some left or leaning organization, New York Times, Mediaite, Huffington Post, of all coming after us because we're raising these questions and attacking us, and the Attorney General of the Commonwealth, Ken Cuccinelli, who just was, talking to us about it and said that he was frustrated because he doesn't have the authority to get into these things. Our reporting on this has been mischaracterized, as has his. We thought we would continue the conversation today by talking to Hans von Spakovsky, who is a senior legal fellow from the Heritage Foundation, a former FEC commission member, co-author of the book Who's Counting, a man who has been very much involved in voter integrity issues for a good portion of his life. Hans, thanks for joining us. We really appreciate you joining us.
Well, Brian, Tori, it's great to talk to you.
All right, so here's my question. Is it legitimate in this time and place where we are today, to question the voting process, or we are, just like the New York Times says, we're just part of the voter fraud fringe? I mean, is it fair to ask these questions?
Well, of course it is, and I was going to say, welcome to the club. John Fund and I have been attacked, viciously, by liberal media outlets, including the New York Times, just because of the fact that we write about actual incidents of voter fraud. I mean, the New York Times, the New Yorker, all of them are part of this vote fraud denial club. They try to say that anybody raises questions like this is crazy, and it's because they don't like these stories coming out, because those stories support the efforts that the other states are making, like putting in common sense things like voter ID.
Yeah, why is it that they're so against the idea of having a photo ID required, so that when you show up at the polling place, you actually can prove you are who you say you are?
Which I have to whip out when I want to use my credit card.
Yeah, if you want to buy a six-pack of beer, you got to do this. If you want to get on a plane, you got to do this. But for some reason, we don't have to show any kind of photo ID if we want to do the most important thing we do as citizens, which is cast our ballots.
Well, you really have to wonder why they are so much against it. I mean, are they against it because it will make it more difficult for them to, pack the polls, to engage in fraud? I mean, after a while, that's what you start to think.
All right, so give me some examples of things that you have seen over the years.
Well, I'll give you an example in Virginia. Over the past year, the Fairfax County Election Board has taken over 100 people off their voter rolls because these are individuals who, when they went to get their driver's license in Virginia, they told state authorities they were not U.S. citizens, but they got registered to vote anyway.
Should be one of the most fundamental rights of citizenship is voting, so being a citizen should be a prerequisite.
Yeah, it should. But look, there's nothing, really nothing, that prevents anybody in Virginia who's not a citizen from getting registered and voting, and probably getting away with it because it's an honor system. No check is made, just like the Attorney General said, when you fill out a voter registration form and send it in. And that's why Virginia doesn't just need a photo ID law. It needs a law like Georgia has passed. It says when you register to vote, you got to provide proof of citizenship. So
that was one of the questions I had. One of the things we've been focusing on is that the authorities in Virginia tell us they either don't have the authority or they don't have the manpower to look into these allegations. Are there states that handle voter fraud in general? And I realize impersonation fraud is just one piece of it. But are there states that handle voter fraud better than others?
Yes, and I'll give you an example of what Virginia ought to do, which the state of Georgia did. In Georgia, the Secretary of State handles elections. Here it's the State Board of Elections. But in Georgia, the Secretary of State some years ago, a Republican, formed a dedicated voter fraud unit of investigators within the Secretary of State's office to investigate incidents all over the state. The SBE needs that too. The state legislature here needs to give them the money and the ability to investigate voter fraud all over the state, and they need a dedicated unit of people to do that. The AG needs statewide jurisdiction to also investigate and prosecute voter fraud, because without that, this stuff happens and not a lot is done about it.
So now, in the case of our friend Dara Fox, who first brought some of these things to our attention to start this whole thing, she said that, we said, well, are you going to take this to anybody? And she said, I'm going to take it to the Attorney General. She took it to the Attorney General. The Attorney General said, I don't have jurisdiction. I can't get into this thing unless I'm asked to by the State Board of Elections. State Board of Elections, we get this guy on yesterday, and he weasels all over the place, won't give us a straight answer about why they won't investigate it. But he says, I can't really get into it until the County Board of Election asks us to get involved. It seems like everybody's pointing their fingers around, and nobody wants to take responsibility. They just sort of want it to go away. I can't imagine a County Board of Elections wanting to get in this, because if they do, then they are therefore admitting that they didn't do their jobs correctly.
Well, part of it also, again, is manpower. County boards of elections, again, they don't have dedicated investigators who can go in and look at these kind of incidents. Again, take Fairfax County. They issued 2,600 provisional ballots. They looked at every single one of these. Were people who came in and there was some kind of problem. They didn't have an ID, or maybe they weren't a U.S. citizen,
right.
The record showed. Only 40% of those ballots actually ended up getting counted, finding that people really were eligible. That's 60% of people who came in and either intentionally made a mistake or there was some other kind of problem with their ability to vote.
Hey, Hans, what Dara told us about is what we call impersonation fraud, people coming and pretending to be somebody they aren't. At least that's what she thinks she saw. Is that the biggest problem with voter fraud? Is it the impersonation fraud, or is it something else?
I actually think a bigger problem, and it's because of where we are located in Virginia, is next to Washington, D.C., is I think there are probably hundreds, if not thousands, of people who aren't U.S. citizens who are here either legally or illegally who are registered to vote. And that is something that it's hard to close the barn after the election. That's why the state legislature needs to do things, like I said, putting in a proof of citizenship requirement for when you register to vote. But the other thing they need to do is, look, Florida had to sue the Department of Homeland Security to get access to federal databases so they could start checking citizenship on their voter registration rolls. So that's now open to Virginia. Virginia needs to do the same thing. They need to start accessing DHS records and checking the voter registrations of every single person registered in the state to check citizenship status.
Well, Hans von I have a hard time with the name.
Spakovsky.
Spakovsky.
It's a Southern name.
Yeah. Thank you so much from the Heritage Foundation for talking to us, a man who's done a lot of work on this issue over the years.